Hello everyone, my name is Alston and I'm the facilitator for the King Street Center Floor Wardens Program. We're here today this is the Great American Shakeout Day, and we've just had our drill here in the building. So now I'd like to talk with you a little bit about what to do before, during, and after an earthquake at work and at home. So we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the various types of earthquakes and then what you can do to prepare for them. I'm going to start off with the premise of danger is not knowing what's dangerous. Now these next slides were taken with a camera that was found buried on the beach when they had the Thailand tsunami. And a relief worker found it buried, picked it up, took the chip out, took it back to the United States and looked at it, and he found these slides, and they were time dated. So this is the first slide. And what's significant about this slide is when a tsunami occurs, as the wave comes in, the energy and the water column comes in, it causes the water on the beach to retreat. So what happened here is the water retreated. In a lot of places in the world, the water retreated so rapidly that fish were beached. And people were running out, gathering up the fish and going, "Oh, a gift from the gods, you know." But then 2 minutes later, here comes the tsunami, right? Here comes the tsunami, and 2 minutes after that, here's the last pictures that were on the camera. And unfortunately, the people perished in this particular incident. Now, the bad news is that these pictures were taken in front of this hotel. And so if the people had known that if the water retreats when it's not a tide, they could have possibly made it to these buildings and survived. These pictures were taken from a multi-story hotel. Now, interestingly enough, this particular tsunami has been covered in two big production movies. One is The Impossible by Naomi Watts, and it's a true story about a family of four that was staying at this resort, and they were all washed away during the tsunami, and miraculously all four of them survived. The other one is a Matt Damon movie, and it's called The Hereafter, so check them out on Netflix. Okay? Now, we live here in the Pacific Northwest on the Ring of Fire in an unstable world that's prone to natural disasters. So to borrow the motto of the Boy Scouts, we need to be prepared for whatever comes along. So what we want to do is prepare for the worst case. And then that way we're going to be ready for whatever else comes along, except maybe the zombie apocalypse, and I don't know what you do about that. It's kind of disturbing that lately the zombies have been picking up speed. When the zombies started out, they shuffled along and you can outrun them pretty good. But the latest movies, they picked up speed and they're pretty hard to outrun. Now remember Mount St. Helens? And remember this article. The most dangerous volcano in America is Mount Rainier. It's not dangerous necessarily because it's going to erupt, but because it's going to collapse. Okay? And the northwest quadrant of Mount Rainier is rotting away from the inside, and eventually it's going to collapse in, and the glaciers on top are going to fall into the molten material below. They're going to melt off, and there's going to be a lahar that sweeps down the waterfront. In years past, it has gone as far as the port of Tacoma. Okay, so that's our hazard there. And then we have winter storms. We have a big winter storm about every other year. And we have power-related blackouts. Who remembers the Hanukkah Eve storm, 2006? 1.8 million people in the region without power, 70-mile-an-hour winds. Now, you have multiple reasons for power failures. You know, it could be windstorms, technological failures, terrorist attacks, earthquakes, incompetent operation. Now, remember this event? New York City, no power for 2 days. There were millions of people affected by this. And coincidentally, there was a baby boom about 9 months later. We also have hazardous material releases. Those can happen anywhere. In this particular building, we're just north of an intermodal yard. This is a situation here at King Street where we had to shelter in place because of a chemical spill that occurred down south of us. And then remember this, it occurred fairly recently, the San Bruno gas main explosion. We have capacity gas lines running all through the state. And then Pineapple Expresses. They don't like us to call them Pineapple Expresses, but that's the common name. But really what they're called is atmospheric rivers. And these are situations where storms develop up in Russia. They sweep down over Hawaii, and then they flow back up into the Pacific Northwest. Here's a picture of one that hit us a few years ago. Caused widespread flooding. Remember when the Cowlitz River was closed? Wiped out parts of Rainier National Park? And then it created a new creek in Woodinville. Now, again, the earthquake is our worst case scenario, so it's what we're going to kind of focus on now. Now, there's three types of earthquakes. So the deep quakes, like the Nisqually quake, crustal quakes, and subduction zone quakes. So let's talk a little bit about the Nisqually quake, February 2001. The epicenter on that one was 33 miles deep. Now, I call it the latte quake, because I was here at King Street Center when it happened, and I saw people drinking lattes, talking on their cell phones, smoking cigarettes. I saw them there for a few hours after the event. For the Nisqually quake, there was 42 seconds of shaking, 1 death, $2 billion worth of damage, and it was 6.8 on the Richter scale. But the Richter scale doesn't really tell you the whole story. What the Richter scale does is it measures the amount of energy that is released at the site of the earthquake. For each increase of 1, you have 10 times the energy. So if you get a magnitude 8, it's going to release 1,000 times more energy than a magnitude 6 earthquake. But the problem is it does not measure ground motion. That's what you're really after, is how hard is the ground shaking. So the better measure of that is a G. So you measure it in the form of a G. Now what's a G? So if you get on the roller coaster and the tallest hill, you go down, you're falling, and then the pressure that pushes you back in your seat as you start back up, that's about a G. Or if you get a muscle car, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, like some of those cars can do, a G is what's pushing you back in your seat, okay? So imagine a G, boom, 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 for 30 seconds, 42 seconds, whatever the earthquake happens. So it's going to be throwing things around back and forth. So what you really want to look at is what percentage of a G it is. Now the latte quake, we had, around the region, we had about 10% of a G. Here at King Street, because of the liquefiable soils, we had about 20% of a G. There was less G force at the Port of Tacoma and in Olympia, closer to the Nisqually quake than there was here at King Street. So it's all over the map. It depends upon the subsurface. So take a look here. Here's Northridge, 6.7, and Nisqually, 6.8. Now, you look at Northridge quake, and they had ground motions of up to 1.7% of a G. Now remember, here at King Street, it was 20% of a G. Okay, they had 1.7, okay? It was 0.2%, right? So 0.20. So we're 1.7 Gs, okay? Look at that, okay? And so that's what we're after here. We want to look at how much the ground is moving. Here's Haiti. 100,000 people killed in Haiti, so you can look there. And Calexico, California, 7.2. Look at the size there. That's just south of San Francisco or Los Angeles area. If that had happened about 75 miles north of there, it would have been catastrophic. Now the crustal quakes, those are the ones that we're really concerned about. They're the shallow faults, and they're anywhere from 10 miles deep to 22 miles deep. And you can see here, those are all the identified shallow faults in our region. There's quite a few of them. Now, here's the ones that are really of concern. The Seattle Fault in the middle. We've got the Olympia Fault, the Tacoma Fault, the Devil's Mountain Fault up north of us. Now, if you zero in on the Seattle Fault, think I-90. Think where the ferries hit on Bainbridge Island. Think that port. That port, Eagle Harbor, and the harbor beside that, was created by the last Seattle Fault earthquake. Okay? And think following Highway 90 all the way past Issaquah up into the mountains. That's the Seattle Fault. Now back in 2005, they created a whole group of multidisciplined groups, looked at what would happen if they had a 6.7 earthquake on the Seattle Fault. Now that's not the worst earthquake that can happen, but that's the one they think is the most likely. Right? And they studied that, and they said that the damage would create an earthquake of the most devastating natural disaster in U.S. history. It would be cataclysmic, they said. So 6.7 on the Richter scale for the Seattle Fault quake is going to produce ground motions of greater than 75% of a G. Some places it'll be more, like the Northridge quake. Okay? Hundreds of aftershocks of a magnitude 6 or above. Now, how likely? I don't quite understand how they come up with these likelihoods. You know, they said the last quake here was about 1,100 years ago. They say they average every 750 years, but then they say it's only a 5% chance over the next 50 years. So, and if you go all of the local faults, you're looking at a 15% chance. Okay? So compare that against the odds of winning the lotto and when you're deciding whether to invest money in disaster supplies. Now we also have subduction zone quakes. Now this was the quake that occurred up in Anchorage, Alaska back in 1964. Now this is subsidence that happens with these types of quakes. Now look at the folks standing up here. Look standing there. Those are 5.5 or 6 foot people. Look at the distance there. Look down here. Look down here. Okay? So that's what's known as subsidence. And interestingly enough, that's what happened in the recent Japanese tsunami. They had the seawall built, but the subsidence caused the elevation differential, and then the tsunami went over the top of the barriers that they built. So here's some of the mega quakes that have occurred. Japan, magnitude 9, 2011. New Zealand. And that's a good one for us to look at, and we really look at that because it's the type of construction that we have here in the United States. And then you have Chile, 8.3, I'm sorry. Now, 2 quakes in the same neighborhood. The Indonesian quake and tsunami, 9.3. But then 92 days later, they had another Sumatra quake, 8.6. Now, they're so close together, at first they thought they were just an aftershock. But they've studied it, and now they're thinking it was 2 completely separate quakes, but only 92 days apart. Here's Chile and New Zealand, 7 Japanese quake, 15,000 people dead, thousands and thousands injured. It was 20 miles deep, 6 minutes of shaking in that event. 6 minutes, can you imagine? And then we have the North American subduction zone quakes, right? The last quake that here was in Alaska in 1964, but then you had the other time, the Cascadia quake happened on January 26, 1700. Now, how do they know the exact date? Because they researched it here and geologic evidence here of a major quake, and they dated it back, and they found that a rogue tsunami had wiped out 2 villages in Japan, and they had the exact date. Now, here's the Cascadia subduction zone quake. The last time it occurred was in 1700, and you can see it runs all the way, St. Mount Shasta in the south, all the way up to Vancouver Island. The strait of, it's called the Juan de Fuca Plate. Okay? 6 minutes of shaking. 30% of a G here in Seattle. Okay? So think 3 times Nisqually here in Seattle, but the trick is it's going to last 6 minutes. So what do you do during an earthquake? Do you run or do you hide? Okay, I'm here today to promote drop, cover, and hold. You don't want to be part of the feet don't fail me now crowd. So let's take a look at these pictures here of quakes. So what do you notice about the destruction in the following slides? That's Haiti. It's Italy. Another Haiti shot. Look at the buildings that are still standing there. Look at that building, that building, that building. Those buildings were all still standing. So if you were in a building that was properly constructed and you stayed inside the building, you'd be okay. But if you're in one of these poorly constructed buildings, then you're in a world of hurt. So look at this. See that building? Those buildings stayed standing. Now Christchurch, as I mentioned, is a really good earthquake to look at because it's very similar construction standards to what we have here in the United States. So this is Christchurch. This is a picture there. Now notice the tables. The brick wall didn't do so good, but look at the tables. Anybody that had the presence of mind to drop, cover, and hold under those tables would have gotten along just fine. Anybody that's part of the feet don't fail me now crowd that was running out because, oh my God, look where they'd end up. They'd have been under the rubble. Now, look at the throne of ease there, okay? Not the ideal place to ride out an earthquake, but if they just grabbed the bowl and sat still, they would have been fine. So what to expect? Earthquake happens. It's going to strike suddenly. Everything will start shaking. The lights will flicker. Cabinets are going to be walking around looking for somebody to fall on. People are going to be screaming. All heck is going to break out. So what do you want to do? Running during an earthquake is a really, really bad idea, because greater than 20% of a G, the odds of you falling down and breaking your arm or dislocating your shoulder or breaking your wrist or hitting your head and being knocked out are really great. Okay, so it's much better to drop cover and hold on than it is to try to run out. Okay, because you don't want to have to start the disaster with a broken arm. Now here's Nisqually quake, King Street Center. That picture was taken from the roof of King Street Center. Interestingly, I had a friend who was outside when that hit, and she was going, "Whoa, what's going on?" And she looked, and the fellow that owned the Phoenix Underground comes running out, and he's got an Irish wolfhound, which they weigh pretty good, right? And he's got it in his arms, and he runs out, and he got right about there, and then that whole facade break down. So if it had been 1001, 1002 slower, he would have been hit by the debris. This is Seattle. What this is parapet falls. And you look at the buildings around us, there's parapets all over the place. The overhangs structures, they're all over the place. Look at Olympia. And that's with 10 or 15% of a G down in Olympia. So you'd have been walking along there, it would have been really hard on you. Okay, so the safest action is to drop. You want to get your head below grade as soon as you possibly can. And then you want to cover up as you can. And that's not to protect you from the building falling down, it's to protect you from all the stuff that's in the ceiling. Because these are drop ceilings, and there's light fixtures and air conditioning vents and all sorts of stuff up in the ceiling. Now we were lucky here because this building got built to modern earthquake standards, so it's less likely that all this stuff's going to fall. But that's what you want to do. You want to get your head down below grade. Now why do you want to hold on? Okay, so if the table's jumping around, you don't want it to be smashing your fingers. You go in like this, oh, and the table's smashing on top of your fingers. Or you don't want it to walk away and leave you. And you look up and, oh my God, the table's gone. So you hang on and ride it out, right? So guard your fingers. You don't want to go stand in a door. They used to say, stand in a doorway. Well, the doorways in Western construction are not the strongest places. They're the places where space planners say people should go in and out. So you go up to a door, it's no more structurally sound than anything else. You're holding on to it, and the door is slamming your fingers. And again, you have to start off with pinched fingers. So drop, cover, hold, ride it out. Don't have a desk? Just get up against a wall and cover the back of your neck and get on all fours. You don't want to roll up in a fetal position, and because you'll be rolling around like a bowling ball during the earthquake, okay? So get down, protect your head and space. So why do we practice a drop, cover, and hold? We just had a drop, cover, and hold drill here. And the reason we want to do that is to create a kinesthetic memory, a body memory, so to speak, of what to do. Because if the disaster, if it certainly starts happening, and your mind is going, oh my God, what you want to do is create multiple ways to remember it. You want a body memory and you want a mental memory. So that's why you've got to actually do it and practice it. And that's why we promote drop, cover, and hold drills. So, for example, if you were sitting at this particular drafting table, this was here on the 5th floor in King Street Center during Nisqually. So if you're sitting at that drafting table going, wow, this is really neat, I'm just going to write it out right here. Look at the trajectory of that bookshelf in relation to where that person's temple would have been if they were sitting at that particular desk. So if you're indoors, don't run outdoors, okay? You want to avoid the exterior walls and windows, and doorways, again, are hazardous, as I mentioned earlier. So what's wrong with this picture? Aftershock. So he's standing right there. That building does not look very structurally sound at this particular point in time. Look at what's wrong with that picture. This is Nisqually. So what's wrong with that picture? That's the old-fashioned plate glass. Shatters and cuts everything. She's sticking her hand out of it to pointing it out. So if there were to be an aftershock, or if it were just to give up the ghost and fall out, her hand would be severed or severely cut. Now in high-rise buildings, it's interesting. You want to drop, cover, and hold, but you don't want to try to evacuate during the quake, as I mentioned. Now the fire alarms and sprinklers may go off as a result of the shaking, but you want to be very careful of damaged stairs. You don't want to be part of the feet don't fail me now crowd that's running down the stair and you turn the corner and the stairwell has collapsed. right? And then here comes the other feet don't fail me now crowd behind you, and they push you right into the precipice, okay? So be really careful. And you don't want to use the elevator. The elevator might work after an earthquake, but you're going down, and then an aftershock takes it out completely, and then you're stuck in the elevator. Now, if you think it takes the Otis elevator guy a long time to get to you on a normal day, just imagine after a disaster. You may be stuck in there for a while, okay? So don't use elevators. Now, the elevators in this building and most modern buildings are designed for seismic events, and they're programmed to go to the next floor and open their door to let you out. So you want to beat feet out of that elevator as soon as possible. Now, outdoors, you want to avoid power lines, beware of mud and rock slides, and beware that in the movies, they had some really bad earthquake movies over the years. In the movies, the earth opens up. And did anybody see Earthquake 11.0? And it had Beau Bridges was the president. It was one of the worst movies ever. So and they had this earthquake occur, and the earth opened up and chased down an Amtrak train, and then it closed up again. And I'm surprised in the movie it didn't have the earth burp. Okay? But it's not going to open up and close. It'll go up or down. That's what'll happen. Okay? Now, you want to be really careful about guardrails. Why would you be careful about a guardrail? So what if a power line is on it and you touch the guardrail, it's electrified. Now, and keep in mind, with power failures and down lines, and think about this for the winter storm season coming up, if there's a power line down, it doesn't go all arky-sparky like it does in the movies, and they don't play suspenseful music so you know somebody's about to get fried. It can still electrocute you. And so you go up to it to put a fire out. And one fellow about 2 years ago, he saw a fire in the woods. Of course, it was raining, but so why is there a fire in the woods? So he goes to put it out and he electrocutes himself. Okay? So be aware. And what happens when the power grid goes down and alerts quick? So the system turns itself off, turns itself back on, turns itself off. Okay? So you might catch it in one of those few second bumps that they use to kind of clear limbs and squirrels and that sort of thing. So you want to be really, really careful around down power lines. Now, this is a mudslide that occurred from Nisqually. People heard about the Oso event. There's multiple mini Osos that could occur if we have a major quake here in the Puget Sound. Now, this is what I mean by subsidence. This didn't open up, the road subsided. So you're in a street downtown during a quake. That's a bad place to be. Because what happens is the buildings are going to start shaking back and forth. And the way it affects buildings is one part's moving one way, the other part's moving the other way. They're going back and forth and back and forth. Now what's going to happen then is the windows are going to pop out, or they stand a great likelihood of popping out. Okay? So they're going to be popping out, and the windows